Hi, hello everyone. This is National Master Asaf Givon here, and today we're going to examine the Sicilian Dragon variation. So in this video I would present one game that I've played about 2 years ago against a very decent player, a FIDE master rated approximately 2350, and by this game and some other things that I will show along the way, I want to present some of the typical ideas for this opening, some ideas for white as well as for black, and how to treat this opening and how to create a counterplay. So first of all, what is the Sicilian Dragon and how do you get there? So after e4, c5, knight f3. Here black has actually three ways to reach the dragon variation. The most common one starts with the move d6, but also there is one variation which is called the accelerated dragon, which goes after knight c6 first, d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, g6. And this is actually a bit more tricky variation to face with white, because if white is playing here in a very generic and simple way, he might be tricked into getting a tempo down version of the regular dragon variation. And by this I mean that after knight c3, bishop g7, bishop e3, trying to set up the so-called English attack setup of pieces, the bishop on e3 followed by queen d2 and long castle. Now black plays knight f6, and here the usual way of proceeding for white would be the pawn to f3, long castle, and something like queen d2 preparing long castle. But here actually you would notice that the pawn of black is on d7 yet, so black could actually play here a very strong move, d5 straight away, which he could not do in the other variation that we're going to see in the game. And you will see precisely this position in a couple of moments, only with white already being castled here. So black is just winning one tempo. So in order to avoid this move order trick, the best way white to continue here is a very important move, bishop to c4, controlling this d5 square, not allowing black to achieve this d5 break so easily. And after black castles comes another extremely important move. So once again, if white tries to go with the usual attacking ideas with f3, here black has a quite unpleasant response prepared for white with queen to b6. This is a little bit of a surprising move, because black is putting his own queen in opposition to the white bishop on e3, but it turns out that white has no really dangerous way to exploit it. For example, after knight f5 attacking the queen, black has queen takes b2 followed by queen takes c3 check, and black is actually winning here. So if white tries to cover the pawn on b2 with a move such as bishop b3, black has a nice tactic here, knight takes e4, opening up this bishop to attack the knight, and white might run into some tactical problems here. So going back to this position after castles, once again white has a very important move, bishop to b3, covering the pawn on b2, so now the move queen to b6 loses all of its sense. And now black will most likely play d6 here, threatening already knight to g4, and here white will play f3, and we are coming back into this very normal dragon type position. So this is the first move order that black could try to play. Of course, not everything is free in life, So for example, in this move order with 2 knight c6, black is allowing white to play this move bishop to b5, which is called the Rossolimo Sicilian, which is also a very serious line that a lot of white players like to play. So this is the reason why some people are a bit dissatisfied with this move order for black, and they try to do something else. Also, one more thing that black is allowing only by this move order is the move c4 here. So this is called the Maruzi system. White is trying to grab space in the center and try to squeeze black into a cramped position. This is also a very common way for white to play, and once again, some players with the black pieces are disliking this type of positions, which are more positional, and they prefer not to go to this. Another move order, which is actually very popular today, as I've seen, is to play straight away here the move pawn to g6, which is actually called the ultra accelerated dragon. Very funny name, but actually it has a bit of sense, because the main point is to avoid these lines with bishop b5. Now of course the move bishop b5 without having a knight on c6 to attack, losing all of its sense. And a lot of the games would just transpose to a regular dragon with d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, and something like bishop g7, and we are back into a normal dragon territory. Even though also this move order has one drawback, or at least one extra possibility that white is getting, specifically in this move order. In this position, white might consider taking with the queen actually on d4, attacking the rook on h8, practically forcing the move knight to f6. And now white has a couple of possibilities, the most forcing one being pawn to e5, which actually at first looks very bad for black, but luckily for him he has the resource knight c6 attacking the queen. The queen is forced to go, and now black has the move knight to d5, and this variation is actually considered to be quite interesting and solid for black. Is not in too much troubles here. So this is also a very possible move order to play with black, but once again I must stress that a lot of the games would just transpose into a normal dragon after knight takes d4 and bishop g7. So this is a couple of words about move orders. Now let's go to the main line. So pawn to d6, it's the most common way to reach the dragon. And now after knight e3 g6, we reach the starting position of this variation. Once again, white is of course in no way forced to go into this bishop e3 and long castle type ideas. If white is seeking for a more quiet approach where he has less risk, of course he can just play a move like bishop e2 followed by short castle. But this is a bit of a, let's say, a bit of a compromise, so white is not really fighting very hard for the initiative, is trying to be safe, which is of course is a possible approach. But in this video we will try to examine some possibilities in the more principled lines with bishop e3. One first notice here that black could not play here the tempting move knight to g4, trying to attack the bishop on e3. You would see that the bishop on e3 is in general a very important piece in this opening, so it makes sense for black to try to attack it. But here, specifically here, white has the resource bishop b5 check, and it turns out that black has no good way to block this check. So for example, bishop d7 would be answered with queen takes knight, and the bishop could not take the queen because it's pinned. So this is not possible, so black will play bishop g7. And now the very important move for white, pawn to f3, reinforcing the pawn on e4 and controlling the g4 square. Now moves such as knight g4 are not possible anymore. And also In the future, white will have the possibilities of attacking on the king side with a move like pawn to g4, as we will see later on. Short castle, queen d2, preparing long castling, knight c6. So this is the first main crossroads in the dragon variation. Here it's actually quite a big choice for white of action. The two main lines here are either castling immediately, which is the move that I've played in the game, also the variation I mostly play personally. But the absolute main line here is actually the move bishop c4. So once again we see this motive of trying to control the d5 square. Of course, in itself bishop c4 it's a very natural move, developing a piece, but white might argue that the move bishop c4 loses a bit of a time in the attack, because let's say after a move like bishop to d7, long castle, or rook to c8, the bishop is most likely forced to move once again, because otherwise he will have some tactical problems along the c file, and white in a sense lost 2 tempos in the attack, which he could invest in more aggressive moves such as g4 or h4. So this is one very possible approach for white, but once again this video is not meant to be a very theoretical video. We will not discuss too deeply about theoretical lines, so I just wanted to illustrate some typical ideas, so I will just concentrate on the moves that played in the actual game. So I've played long castle, so arguably the most natural move for white regarding his previous moves. The reason that the move bishop c4 is slightly more popular is because this move order allows the pawn break in the center d5, which is also the main line for black, trying to break in the center to open up the game. The main point being that if white tries to grab material too, let's say, too greedily with knight takes d5 and queen takes d5, it looks like white has won a pawn and is attacking the rook on a8, but actually black has a very important resource here, queen to c7, actually leaving this rook on a8 unprotected. And you can see that even though white is a pawn up, the black piece has a lot of freedom. His bishops are very strong on the long diagonals, and he has a lot of open lines against the white king. And if white takes the rook, it turns out that after bishop f5, white is forced to give up his queen because black is threatening queen takes c2, checkmate. And this is in black's favor. So usually what white players here play is the move bishop to d4, trying to defuse the bishop on g7, which is a very important piece in the dragon. Basically the piece which is attacking the white's king. And here after a move like e5, bishop to c5, actually black has a very important resource here, bishop to e6. So if you're searching for ways to play for black here, I can recommend this line, because now a lot of people might be tempted to take the rook on f8, which is just on priest right now, but it turns out that after queen takes bishop, first of all black is threatening to play bishop h6, winning the queen on d2, and after something like king b1, stepping out of the diagonal, black has just a wonderful attack here with his bishops and his rook coming to b8 to attack the white king. One illustrative variation goes pawn to e4, sacrificing even more material in order to open up this diagonal for the bishop. Knight takes e4, rook b8. So you see that practically all of black's pieces are now ideally placed for the attack. And after something like c3, black has f5, attacking the knight, and after knight g5, knight takes c3, white's position is completely collapsing here and black is winning. So d5 is a very important move. By the way, if you remember a couple of moments ago, we were speaking about this exact position, only with white not being castled, the king was still on e1. So this is why in the accelerated dragon, black is kind of saving one tempo on this pawn break. But in the game, black chose another direction. It took my knight on d4, with the idea that after bishop takes d4, black has this move bishop e6. Posting the bishop on a very active square, attacking my pawn on a2. And black is trying to achieve a setup connecting with putting the queen on a5 and the rook on c8, trying to create counterplay this way. And a very important move for white, at least to my knowledge, is actually a prophylactic move, king to b1. So the idea of this move is that now, if black is trying to go back to his original plan with queen a5, white has the tactical resource here, which is also a very important motif in the dragon, which could be useful in a lot of positions, is knight to d5, attacking the black queen on a5, with the main point being that after queen takes d2, this is not a check anymore, so that's why the move king b1 was extremely important. Now white has the intermediate move knight takes e7 check, and only after the king moves, white recaptures the queen and he won a pawn. So in this position, black is deprived of the option of queen a5, but he needs to create some counterplay on the queen side of the board, which is where white king is situated. So my opponent played the queen to c7, which is also the main line here, with the idea that after h4, white is beginning his attack. Black plays rook f to c8, and trying to go back to his original idea, only with the tempo down. Let's see what happens if black tries to block the attack with a move like h5, which is also a very typical move in the dragon. Black tries to stop the attack, but this move h5 is also kind of dangerous. It's moving the pawns in front of the king, and here white has a very direct attack with the move g4, sacrificing the pawn. If black is just taking everything which is given to him, white is developing a very strong attack here. One illustrative line here is knight takes h5, rook takes h5, sacrificing even more material, but it turns out that after bishop takes bishop, white is threatening here something like queen h6 followed by checkmate, so black probably have to take, and after queen g5 check, eventually black would be just hopeless against the very simple threat of rook h1 checkmate. Black is losing. So the move h5 is a bit risky here. That's why he played his rook to c8. Now white could reinforce his attack with the move g4, but actually there is even no need for this move, because white can play the move h5 straight away. Because if this is taken, once again, it's very dangerous for black. After g4, this is a very nice line. Now white has a very strong attack already, but the best move in this position to actually finish the game off almost immediately is pawn to e5, sacrificing yet another pawn, and now bishop to d3, posting the last piece into the attack. Now the bishop is making huge pressure on this diagonal, and the threat is simply to play g5 and to drive the knight away on f6. So for example, here after g5, if the knight moves somewhere back, black is getting mated, so knight h5. But now after rook takes h5, black is getting mated very quickly. So black continued with his original plan of queen a5, even though he lost one tempo. Now I took on g6, h takes g6. So you see that white already gained something, he opened up the h file for his rook. But this is only the beginning, it's still not a checkmate. Of course, black has his own chances. For example, right now he's threatening to take my knight on c3 and followed by capturing on a2. So for example, if white plays g4, rook takes, there is queen takes a2, and I'm getting under some attack here. So this is not recommended. Please notice that knight d5 here is not as powerful as before, because now after queen takes queen, knight takes e7, black has the move king f8 that he did not have before, and white simply loses the piece after king takes e7. So white is forced to play a3 here to safeguard his pawn on a2. Now the question for you is how to create counterplay with the black pieces here. So the most common move here, and the one which my opponent plays, is rook to b8, trying to push the b pawn down the board and to open up the b file for his pieces. So if white plays very slowly and naively, black could actually have a very strong attack here. You see that all of his pieces are concentrated on the queen side, also his bishop's kind of looking at this direction. So after bishop d3, it's also an important move, developing the last piece into the game. You will see this bishop later having a very important job. Black plays b5, and here, once again, black is threatening b4, which is a huge threat. So if white is just ignoring the threat with a generic move like g4, black plays b4, and suddenly his attack is simply irresistible here. Black is all over the place, threatening the bishop on d4, putting pressure on b2. This is extremely dangerous. So white is actually a very important move in this position, which is a very beautiful move, queen to g5, which is both an attacking move and a defensive move at the same time. Now black cannot play b4 because then the queen is taken on a5. So my opponent played his queen to c7, renewing the threat of pawn to b4. And now white's attack comes just one move before black's attack. And this is a really kind of typical for this variation. This is a very sharp line, so it could be one move for this direction or the other that decides the game. So if white is one step ahead or black is one step ahead, it could be the difference between winning and losing. So white is playing the break e5 in the center, attacking the knight on f6. Now the bishop on d3 is kind of coming back to life. Pawn takes, bishop takes. So the bishop is skewering the queen and the rook on this diagonal. Black is forced to play his queen to c5, because now white cannot take the rook, because then my queen is, nope, sorry. Then my queen is lost on g5. So this is why white plays his pawn to f4, defending both the queen and the bishop on e5. Once again threatening to take the rook on b8. This is, and in the game black moved his rook on b7. Now once again black is still having this b4 move, which is a very strong idea of counterplay. So white has to react very quickly. And now I'm kind of challenging you to find the final blow here for white. You see that his pieces are concentrated very well. His bishop's in the center, the rook on the h file, the queen on g5, kind of ready to come into the attack. So white is finally breaking through. Bishop takes g6, destroying black's king shelter. And the main threat here for white, if let's say if black plays his pawn to b4 as he wanted, now white has the killer move rook h7, threatening queen takes g7 checkmate, and if the rook is taken, then queen takes g7 is a checkmate. So this was the position in the game. Black already understood he is under extremely difficult pressure, probably already his position is beyond salvation. But after bishop f7, this is his last try. Now white has the final killer move, rook h8, sacrificing another rook in order to play queen takes bishop. And it turns out that black is practically hopeless from the threat of rook h1 with a very quick checkmate. So this was a short video about the dragon defense from white's and black's perspective. I hope you learned some ideas, some typical methods of attack from white and from black. This is of course only a small taste of a very big and rich opening, which is played by a lot of strong players. So even Magnus Carlsen played it, and Kasparov in his prime also played the Dragon Sicilian. So a very rich opening. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video, and see you next time. Bye bye.